Welcome to another episode of Archviz and Chill, continuing from our previous episode, which was a portfolio review with Matthew. I'm very happy to have you on here and speaking your mind. But before we even get there, and Matthew just reminded me of this, as you know, I always like to taste a little wine before we start, and today we have a nice, I'm not sponsored by them, but I always put it out there, nice bottle of South African red papaya. And you guys know the premise. This is just a chilled out chat. And today I have the amazing Matthew Bannister from Dbox. And cheers.
You're too kind.
Your
and I'm drinking a glass of sparkling water because in a previous life I drank swimming pools of lovely red wine and decided that it was a good idea not to continue drinking swimming pools of lovely red wine.
And that's already... how deep your character is, and this kind of sets already the tone of just how much of an interesting person you are. And I've gotten to know you along the times, and I just want you to introduce yourself in your own words, and we just take it from there.
I'm Matthew. I wouldn't know how to introduce myself. I'm a middle-aged person that works in this industry. I'm tired. It's that's about it really. You know, it's started a company back in '96 called Dbox, and studied art for much of my life, and I'm also a musician, and yeah.
And your music, I think this and again the podcast is to talk about a range of subjects, but I think one of the things that I also learned recently, relatively recently, is and I'd like to touch upon is a little bit before we even delve into anything, is a bit of your multiple facets into art. So you're this amazing artist that does Archviz, that has this big company, has done it and does it at the most professional level ever, but you are also quite a renowned musician. Our studio has been passing your music, and we're all like deep lovers of your music, and I think it'd be great to actually start talking a little bit about that and kind of...
Well, thank you. That's very kind. And thank you for listening. It's but to change the subject away from my music, the idea of art for me was always more than kind of just one thing. And I studied a lot of art when I was a child. My mother taught me the laws of perspective, and I know she taught me the laws of perspective before I first came to America. So I would have been less than 6 years old. Because she could see that I was starting to draw, and I was, you know, in a kind of a medieval kind of way. I was trying to figure out why things were converging. And I remember she used the kind of the train. I'm going to go all over the place here. Shaggy Dog Story #1. I remember she used a train track with trees. Okay. And as soon as she showed that to me, it all clicked. I was like, got it, you know. And I won an art scholarship. Went to a school in the UK under that art scholarship, and then I moved to America, and I first studied fine art, and I got into that. But within that fine art program, I found myself starting to kind of look at other disciplines, and I was actually in a life drawing class, drawing a nude, and in a circle, there's easels and charcoal and all of that, and this guy in a suit came in the studio, and he walked around everybody's easels, and then he came behind me and he tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "I want to talk to you afterwards." I didn't know who this guy was, and I met him afterwards, and I was like an 18-year-old punk rock kid, spending most of my time at CBGB's, kind of doing this art at Parsons School of Design. He said, "Can you draw a building as well as you were drawing her?" I looked at him and I was like, "Of course I can, better," you know, arrogant young kid. And he invited me out to Long Island to do drawings of buildings. He was a developer. So this was like the very beginnings of and he paid me a fortune. He gave me a car, and I had a phone in the car that was like, you know that thing, Pretty Women, the brick, the cell phone that was like the size of a suitcase. I had one of those, and he paid me by the drawing, and I made all sorts of. I made great money for a kid in college. And that was kind of the beginnings of it. And then I went off to architecture school after, because I transitioned. Actually, I came over to England. I was in a band with my brother for a year. Went back to the US, then went to architecture school. Ended up in Cornell in the architecture program there, which is really multidisciplinary. They really encourage sculpture and photography. And from that, got into the digital stuff. I'm going to try and make this quick. So it kind of puts it all in context. Studied under a guy called Don Greenberg, who's like the godfather of computer graphics. He was the one in 1974 that started, 72 I think, 72 or 74, started programming and making the original computer graphics stuff. And this was at a time in the kind of the early 90s where he was developing softwares at the university, which you could actually start to make some beautiful things. And from that, you know, I met up with a couple of very talented guys there, and that was the genesis of Dbox. From that, we started a class called Dbox, and from there, we got into this kind of computer rendering thing when it really didn't exist. There were some companies that clearly predated us, but most of them were based in Europe. We were based in New York, and quickly from there, I tried to figure out a way that professionally we could do more than just visuals, because while visuals are incredibly important to me, I kind of, you know, I wanted to learn more about graphic design. I wanted to understand, you know, not so much the programming of web design, but I wanted to get into that so I could sort of think about how to make a website, you know. And this was we're going back a long time now, and then into branding. So the whole thing kind of came together as Dbox. And then in the course of that, when we were making films, I started to make the music for the films that we were doing. Now, if we rewind a bit,
do you still do that?
No, I don't have time. I don't have time to do the music for them. If we rewind a bit, when we started Dbox, which was called Dbox at the time, it really was a band. Because my colleagues, we were in a band called Release in New York, and it was kind of like the idea is we came to New York to be in a band, and we would do the renderings on the side to kind of make money, right? So I stopped doing that for many years, but when I started making the music again for Dbox films, I retaught myself how to record using all of the available DAWs that are available now, right? And music production. And then from that, I was able to start making my own records. So that's the arc. That's the full story. I tried to close it where you began. Yeah. So it's a Shaggy Dog story, but yeah, the music is really, really important to me, and I always do my best to encourage artists that are working in Archviz. And when I'm kind of like I'm talking about all these other disciplines, don't for one second think that my passion for Archviz is not incredibly powerful, because it is. I love it. I absolutely love an awesome visual. But I think for me, in order to be a better artist, if I can even call myself an artist, I have to constantly search outside of that and do other things, whether it be really diving into music and making something that's complex musically, or trying something else. And I encourage everybody to do the same. I think it makes you better at other things.
I mean, yeah, this is one of the things, and I knew in this podcast speaking with you, I think this like, yeah, there's a load of wealth in here of what you're saying, and from that small bit that you just said, there's so many things I can pick at, and I'm thinking, what is the pertinent thing to say here and ask? Because the wealth of depth of your conversation, all that you're telling is incredible. And
thank you.
And I mean, I don't want to block you off or anything, but one of the things that always comes to mind, and especially when I'm talking with someone like yourself with the wealth of experience that you have, is, and someone who's seen this evolve and mature, and has actually been one of the primary reasons this has evolved and matured. one of the things I always try to understand is how was this transformation from back in the maverick days of doing a drawing when no one was doing this type of imagery or computer imagery. It was all drawn, and then transitioning through those various phases into what it is today and the full-blown Dbox that we have with various studios around the world. How have you seen this transform? How was it for you? How has it been on you as well, and understanding a little bit of all that magic that's gone through? So it's a multiplex question. You run with it the way you feel best.
Yeah, it's to go back to the beginning of that question. You know, the what we do is I always, and it's something that I try and instill in other characters that work in the way that we work, is I always have I have trouble with the word artist. I always feel a little bit embarrassed when somebody calls me one. I sometimes wince when someone calls themselves one. I don't know why. Because in lots of ways I think that it's a search. It's a search. You're never there. You're never there, and it's a journey, right? You're always. It's just around the corner. When you think you're there and you've made something that you're proud of, it fleets past you. It disappears, and then you're oh, where is it? Can I find it? And so it's like it's that search, and that I think is the kind of the mindset of the way in which at least I work with all the things that I try and make that are creative. But in terms of the journey from Dbox, it's been a hell of a journey. I mean, we are not the first. There are companies that, you know, Hayes Davidson were going well before we were. I mean, we were making computer visuals that were sophisticated architectural computer visuals at the same time that Hayes Davidson was starting, but we did not have a company. We taught for a little while. I went off to graduate school and was doing a bit of teaching back at Cornell when I was at Princeton. And then when we got into...
Well, also at Princeton, sorry.
Yeah, I did graduate school at Princeton. And then I taught there a little bit afterwards. But the search has been really interesting because, you know, when we started, it was kind of like, oh, God, you know, you're going to make these buildings. And myself and Charles and James and Keith, we're kind of like glass. You've got to figure glass out. If we can get glass right, we'll be better than everybody else if we can get the glass right. So we really focused on the glass. And we kind of got that right, and then we kind of really focused on color next because we hid behind color. A lot of our work was very blue and very atmospheric, and I love that work. But myself, I knew that instinctively that the challenge was going to be trying to get color, and we still haven't got it. It's so difficult to get real color, to get all of the spectrums all in there and get it all to work and talk to each other in ways that some of the great painters that, you know, that we were talking about a little earlier. You look at the Singer Sargent right there, and it's just like, can't even get anywhere close to that. That's the search, right? To get to that. And then there was a period along the way where fortunately I started becoming very fascinated with James in fashion photography, and we started doing photography, and we started bringing that into, and then Keith suddenly getting very involved in that, and the idea of taking photographs and making computer backgrounds for that. And this was about 1999, 2000. It's about the time we started doing that, and that's when I was kind of like, we can make stories within these visuals. It's not just architecture. We can plant things. You know, like Le Corbusier planted his pipe and his hat and his glasses in the visuals. I was like, we can make stories out of this. So we started photographing, and, you know, at the beginning we were photographing and actually scanning the photographs to get it digitally to bring into, and then cutting it out. And then there was digital cameras, and we started doing that. So we started appearing in the renderings, whether we were doctors in hospitals or whatever we were. There started to be this layer of storytelling, which was like, instead of using, because back then there was this kind of library that floated around that various houses used, where all the same people, the cardboard cutouts, showed up in everybody's visuals. And we abandoned that. We were right, we have to photograph people properly, under the proper light, and really get them into the visuals. and make that layer of storytelling. And that was a big moment for us. I'm not saying that we were the only ones doing that, but I think we might have been. At that time, I think that we were the first to really take that very seriously. And that caught on like wildfire. When we did that, and this was like 2000, 2001, we saw the other houses, and then it raised the whole game. The game suddenly, but then it was like finally the ball had been kicked off. And what I mean by that is that not to dilute any of the great architectural visualization that had come before that, but then suddenly there was this other kind of storytelling that it's been so important in the history of art that we were suddenly then participating in. We weren't just doing these images of buildings that had stories. We were doing these images of buildings that had narratives that are occupied by people and life and stuff. And that's what everybody's doing now. Sometimes it gets a little.
You were doing this in 99, right?
99, 2000 is when we really started to explore taking our own photographs of characters under the right light, taking photographs of objects, whether they be in trays or flowers or
things you still do to this day.
Yes, we do this today.
At the highest level.
There's a lot more 3D today. If you have an iPad on a table in a scene now, it's most likely a digital iPad. It's not a photograph of an iPad. But although there wasn't iPads back in 99, 2000, we were photographing everything. Bottles of wine, everything, to get all of that stuff into the visuals. And it changed. I think that lifted the whole thing up. And what I mean by the game started then. All the other houses was like, oh, somebody kicked the ball. Let's all run after it. And we all ran after it together, and then all the work. And there were other things. I mean, there's the amazing work that Eric was doing at Luxembourg, which was just so very different than the Dbox work. Yeah. But there was the same narrative that these explosions of reds and oranges, which was, they were doing the Turner, and we were doing, the Philip Lorca, de Courcia. We were. I think that Eric was, and I can't speak for Eric. Well, I have so much respect for him as an artist. Yeah, I just used the word there, by the way, because he really is. He's a funny motherfucker too, man.
Yeah, I've seen his presentations and they're amazing.
Oh my God, they're just I was bummed I couldn't get out to the LA when he did one just recently.
He's a true genius as well.
But he was really doing the Turner thing, and I think looking at abstract expressionism at the time when myself and James and Keith and Charles were kind of like fascinated with Philip Lorca de Courcia, who's a photographer, fashion and art photographer, Crudson, and kind of getting those kind of light and that storytelling into something, and that was trying to, and it kind of, in what it meant is it kind of, Eric ended up working on a lot of competition stuff, and these amazing competition visuals, and Dbox, we got kind of like dragged into the chain of luxury marketing. For better or for worse, but that's where we touched
upon this earlier in our chats, where there's quite a few things once again, where it's kind of we've talked about the revolutionary way that you guys introduced this, but also how important it is, your role in the industry and such, but also.
Hey, but wait a second, 1 second. Don't be a smartass and write a comment and say you photographed something and stuck it in a visual in 1991. I'm sure you did, but don't bother with that. Seriously, I'm talking about the broader idea of doing it all, and how that changed the industry. And I think that we did that.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's always a smartass out there that wants to write a comment.
Comments will always catch up with you in the end, and I think people have to comment whatever they have to comment. And we've seen that, but we're going to touch on that as well.
Okay, yeah.
We're going to get there. One of the things also that is quite interesting in all this is you are an architect.
An architect. I studied architecture. As an American, I can't say I'm an architect. That's a legal term, but
okay.
I have an architectural mind. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's put it. Yeah, I know there is some legalities to it. It is true, and you touched on another good point, legalities, which we will talk about more. But how has your relationship throughout all this that you're explaining and that you're talking about with architecture changed? How has your brain kind of metamorphosed metamorphosed. I don't know if that's a word.
Metamorphosized.
My Portuguese English. Yeah.
It's all right.
Metamorphosized.
Thank God this interview isn't in Portugal, because I'd really be screwed.
Don't worry, I can't really speak anything right now. But how has it changed? I mean, your perception of architecture. How has your way of interpreting architecture, your love for architecture, changed throughout, or probably not changed, throughout this moment in time, and how you've kind of evolved your company and yourself as an artist? How has that dialogue been throughout this this time that you've gone through?
That's a good question. I love architecture. I loved architecture so much that I decided not to be an architect. Because I knew it was going to break my heart.
Yeah, a lot of people right now, I'm sure, are going, yes.
Yeah, because I knew I would be value engineered into heartbreak.
Yeah.
I mean, having said that, I'm not sure I love architecture as much as I used to. I do think with the advent of computer technologies, there's God, somebody's going to crucify me for this, but I do feel that there's a somewhat of a lack of discipline in the critical discourse of architecture.
In what way would you?
Due to the kind of the facility to make things kind of formally fantastic. And that really kind of happened. I think that transition happened during the previous gold rush before the recession. It was a time in which technology allowed people to make all of these expressive things that were all of the cities of the future in Dubai, and everybody became Zaha Hadid. And I feel like, you know, that discipline of architecture kind of went out the window there, and I'm not sure it ever came back. And that's a very personal thing. You know, I can't, you know, but that's at the point where my love for it turned down a bit. I find myself these days, there's some architects that I greatly admire, some of which I'm very fortunate to be clients of mine, and some of which I'm very fortunate to actually have relationships with. But I find myself more recently delving into looking at sort of things from the past, from a long time ago, and reappreciating them in the same way as I did when I went to architecture school. I came from the mindset in art school that in art school there's a lot of kids that just got there and they wanted to be Picasso on the first day. Yeah. And my feeling is that, you know, like Picasso, you have to be able to draw like Raphael before you can become Picasso.
I always say that.
So study the masters, and then from the masters you can learn to be abstract. You know, in architecture school, I went to Florence, I went to Rome, I studied that stuff. I know how to design a classical building. And then I branched off and got very excited about modern architecture, fell in love with Le Corbusier and went all down that road. But I find myself recently, I'm kind of like, if I were gonna buy a house and money were no object, it would probably be something that's rather old, that's got some bones, that's got some cracks and some ceilings that dip, and that's got some weather and some worn. My wife will be mortified because she loves modern. But I don't think I would do modern. I also don't think I would design my own house, because I think that would probably be the same as killing myself. Yeah. That would be suicide.
Yeah.
I renovated our apartment in Brooklyn, which basically just involved designing an area of a kitchen that was about the size of your kitchen, and that nearly killed me. To design for yourself, because every little thing has to be perfect, and then managing that with budget, because it's not going to live just in the computer is
you're going to live with it every day, and
that's right. So I prefer to have something that's old. So my whole point there is that yes, my love for architecture is massive. I think it's a little less than it used to. It's almost like a Morrissey lyric, right? I love you.
You have a lyric for everything.
Which one is this? That is a Morrissey lyric. I love you. I like you only. Oh, I don't know. Everybody.
Someone will comment. Trust me.
Yeah. You know the Morrissey lyric.
I also kind of, I mean, taking in consideration again many of the facts and things you've said, and also the depth of the talk that we're having is not the depth of the talk that will be for everyone. I'm not saying that people, but it is something very specific. So I'm kind of trying to work, where do we go with this? But anyway, going forward, and what I was going to ask, I can't remember if it was this or not, but you spoke about a couple of your, architects that you really admire. And I don't want to put you in a spot where, because some of these architects are also your clients. Out of the classics, is there anyone that really is someone that is close to your soul, or an architect that comes really close to being someone who you really like in terms of, you really like their work, and why is that? I don't want to put you on the spot with contemporary ones because you may have clients. So
no, you can put well, I mean, I'll give you a contemporary one. I have just endless respect for Norman Foster.
Yeah, he is a beast.
He's an incredible man. He's always pushing forwards outside the envelope into the future, thinking about how architecture can affect the way that we live, how it can change the quality of this planet. He is somebody that, used engineering and architecture together to change architecture, and to see his passion and his spirit at the age that he is. He's 82 years young. He has twice as much energy as I do.
Do you follow his Instagram?
I follow his Instagram, yeah.
Where is Norman now, if I can call him that? Where is he now? It's like every time I see Instagram, he's cycling like in France or something like that.
And then to be able to make these remarkable buildings with a practice at that scale, if you can scale quality like that, wow, it's okay to be this this obscure, name a country,
Spain.
Obscure Spanish architect that's making these beautiful minimal houses with where everything is gorgeous, and you go and photograph it afterwards and you look at it and go, this is wonderful. That's amazing. Great architecture. Thank you very much. Yeah. But if you're making buildings at the scale at which
cities,
which Norman Foster's practice has, Foster and Partners, then you're really doing something that's kind of special, I think.
It is. It's so. I mean, I tend to agree with a lot of what you're saying, obviously, but it is incredible how he's built his kind of legacy and how he's grown into this, Foster and Partners, you say, it's this multi-conglomerate of artists and thinkers, and how, so I remember in uni studying, it wasn't like super long ago, but it was a few years ago, studying his works and how, the whole tech and engineering, how it meets art, and how you kind of find that halfway point in tech and artistry, and how he has when I say he, I mean the whole team has built Foster and Partners into what they are today, where they've expanded on their idea, which is where that solid base, and it's kind of also interesting to see that most companies that have that solid base are also companies that tend to grow quite evenly and well through time.
Yes, as opposed to as a rapid expansion, and then you can be the rapid expansion architecture office that becomes the kind of the one trick pony. That it's not about signature, it's about the trick. Yeah. And it's a little bit of that's taken my heart out of architecture.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from.
Classics, Corbu, obviously. I as much as I love the characters like Frank Lloyd Wright and the other greats, I'm a big Corbu fan, big Louis Kahn fan. I think Louis Kahn's buildings are super special. The spaces that I've been in my life where I have felt absolutely like, holy cow, this is architecture, would be Kahn's Kimball.
I've never been.
Kahn's Kimball. I had a moment in Villa La Roche by Le Corbusier where I found myself in a particular spot where I was like, I'm in a purist painting, and I was like, it blew my head off.
I've heard this somewhat
and then the other big one for me was the Pantheon, which blows your head off. When you get inside that baby, you're like, damn.
Yeah.
They finished. That's it. Architecture over. Done. Case closed. Nobody can do better than that. You get inside that space and it's just, that's it, the pinnacle of architecture history.
There is that line of thought that we kind of haven't really evolved much past that in this world that we live. We all take these standards and we've kind of just expanded upon them a little more, but we all come from this time, right? And even Vitruvian Man, when we start to look at all this type of stuff from Vitruvius, etc., and see that we really have come far, but not that far. All the principles are the same. And this goes into that exact thing that we were talking about the base and artistry as a base, and how artistry has to kind of be that base. Whereas I think, and I don't want to, again, generalize, but I think in this day and age, there is rapid consumption of everything. And the rapid consumption doesn't always mean you're getting the right nutrients of everything. I think I've seen artists that actually haven't studied the classics or had that classical background, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, but they have an eye for it, and they can create something with that rapid fire consumption. But at the same time, having that strong base and having those reference which you've mentioned previously, I think really adapts you to be an artist, not a one-trick pony, but into multiple segments and multiple areas where, you could apply your expertise into, let's say, video. You can apply into anything you do. And that reminds me of one of the first days of university when my professor came up and he said, everyone, this is the first day of your life. Because after this, you're transformed, because you no longer see the world in the same way. You no longer address the same things. You no longer look at your shoes and think, these are nice shoes. You will look at how they're built. You will look at the quality of the materials, and you'll look at this type of stuff. And really, that is why, and I think that, again, touching, and I'm looping all around here, but touching on that passion for architecture and how that, I don't exerce it, and it's not something that I practice day to day, but I practice it. My passion is still there. But that profound impact that those years, those formative years had on me, transformed my whole life, transformed my whole perspective, and I was never the same person again. And I think, again, just looping back, it's all about that base, that solid base that builds you into who you are. And when you have that solid base and you have those solid principles, it really is a big help. And it really is that, and it's a bit underrated.
You can never stop learning. I mean, I think too many people are concerned with learning. That their priority of learning is based around technology, and their priority of learning is about plugins and about which setting on the microwave will produce the best pizza. It's like it's good to understand technologies, and the musical softwares and DAWs that I've used and the plugins that I've used to create the latest record that I'm working on, it's incredibly complicated. Fries my brain what I've managed to learn. Far more complicated than any 3D softwares I ever learnt back in the day. But you can't let that get in the way of actually what you're making. And I get the sense that the balance between understanding the technology and understanding the art and having a position on what you're making visually is lost on a lot of people. Take all the tools away, and an artist should be able to grab a stick and make something in the dirt on the floor that looks beautiful. Give a great guitarist the crappiest guitar from a junk shop with a twisted neck, with old strings, where the intonation is all out. And I guarantee you that great guitarist will be able to pick it up and play you something beautiful and meaningful. It's got nothing about the equipment. It's got to do with the soul inside, their artistic spirit. Whereas I think today everybody's chasing after after a guitar that tunes itself, after a guitar that plays itself. There's no such thing, right?
It's that verge of technology and art, and this again goes into something else. Technology is evolving at a rapid pace, and we go to, and I want to get your opinion on this. I'm very curious on this. So there are a lot of things. I mean, we consume Instagram, right? It's made for us almost. And
Unfortunately,
we're gonna get that.
Unfortunately,
we're gonna get that. But
if everybody else agreed to stop using it, I would too. No, I don't mean in our industry. I mean everybody.
Yeah.
It's just like if you don't use it, I'm just sort of
society, right?
I just will I be able to converse in the future if I'm not on this platform? I don't know.
Because we feel
it's a weird evil.
There's a bit of that left out thing, right? And if we're not contemporary, we're not following. If we're not following, we're not contemporary, or we're not contemporary, we're not following. But how? And this is interesting. And it might be polemical. I don't know, but that's what we're here for, right? What is your take on this? I've seen a lot of artwork that is digital, and to some extent, it inspires me a lot. And I've been seeing a lot of art that is now this daily creative art thing. Now, I don't want to say that anything to it or from it. I really enjoy it, and in my general aspect, I really have a good relationship with it, and it inspires me. But what is your take on this rapid fire art that is being produced? That it's like, okay, the technology enables me to do something in 20 minutes, and I might even, I have glass ceilings, literally, throw stones on my own glass ceilings. But what is your understanding of this? Because, I'm not going because you may be able to do something in 5-10 minutes in a drawing, but you've got a lot of experience and a lot of years of this. But what do you take on these softwares and the relatively easy way that it is to create something like 10-15 minutes, grabbing some models from here, there, and the other, and how do you feel that do you feel that's art? Do you feel that time plays a role in the art, or do you how is this? I heard that made sense more or less.
It does make sense. I mean, it's I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the ability to make something very quickly by collaging models that are there. I mean, the ultimate test is I mean, if it does it move you? If it moves you, then it's probably moving towards art. If it doesn't move you, then it's not. I don't care how long it takes to make it, but does it move you, or is it just more stuff, right? I mean, this era of available tools which enable people to make stuff, what it has done is it's enabled a lot of people that probably aren't artists, that never will be artists, to be making what they think is art. It's also enabled a lot of musicians who are not musicians, who never will be musicians, to make noise. And I like and when I say noise, I don't mean like noisy music, because I love noisy music. I grew up at CBGB's listening to hardcore, like flipping upside down off the stage back in the 80s. So it's not that. I consider that music. But there's a lot of stuff out there, but there's too many people in the game. And I think that's just life. I think that it's tricky now, because to sift through and find good stuff is much harder. When I get out of bed, as I'm having my breakfast actually I don't eat breakfast, but when I'm having my coffee and I get on Instagram and I flick through, I see more visuals of architecture in a period of about 45 minutes than I did back when I started Dbox in probably a month. Because back then it was magazines. There was a few things on the internet that were maybe blogs. So the beginning, not even blogs. There were some things that were like websites that had some architecture on them. That then there was the magazines like Architecture Records. So in a month I would see, let's say, maybe 200 images of buildings. I see 200 images of buildings before I finish my first coffee in the morning. So.
And what impact does this have on you as well?
Well, I think that I think that everybody's brain has the ability to absorb a ridiculous amount of information. Whether it's good for me or not, I don't know. I mean, it's like I absorb visual stuff. I love just seeing stuff. I love seeing stuff, and it's
You know where I'm getting with this.
It's no, I don't know where you're going with this. It's good to see all the work that's being done out there, whether it's good or bad. I like to see what everybody's doing. I'm inspired by some, and by some I don't think so good, but it's the social media has enabled me to see a lot more.
Yeah, a lot more, and a lot of good quality and a lot of probably hit and miss. And I just want to make one quick.
God, I sound like a snob.
No, I think that's the thing about the internet, right? We try and open up every single door, but when you open a door, when you close a door, you open another, and then when you open one, you open 20. And I think, your experience and what has had you lead us up until now really shows who you are. And I think here people will also understand the complexity of the subjects of which you talk about. Now, you've thought about these more than myself. I just want to make a small parallel of what the speed thing, and how I was, and I think you nailed it on the head, and how if I have to make a comparative to other things, it's like Duchamp and stuff like that, which basically, it's pop art, stuff like that. Yep. It's not about the speed, but also that history and what has led them to have that speed. Where I'm going with this, and actually was when
let me just that ability to make something quickly that moves you. It's not that 15 minutes that enabled you to do that to make it move you. It's the 50 years that has enabled you to decide which lines to put together that will actually hopefully move an audience. So there's another side to that coin, right?
We're talking about value here. Values, whatever type of values you attribute, and the importance of those values and how we value those things, and the context that they appear, which is quite important. Am I okay to move to the next one?
Of course, yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and that was going to and I think we're going to end on the high note on the Emmy, so we're going to get there. So when we talked about that rapid consumption and all those things, that also got me thinking about something we've been talking about, and the accessibility of art and all this type of stuff, that especially Instagram, which is a platform which is visual, which is very much what we're about. That got me thinking about a big thing that I think yourself and all of us as people who run companies, own company, as artists, if we can call that, are worried about, especially in Archviz, which is all the situation that is going on in regards to crediting. Don't get me started. We've seen that this is kind of the wilderness out there, and that work, and you've talked a lot about that, especially even in the portfolio review, where you mention about the trademarks and using those and things like that. And that in itself is a podcast right there. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this wilderness that is out there, and how our work is being used, and you've kind of alerted everyone that this is not okay. And from someone with
it's not okay.
And it isn't. And I want you to kind of tell everyone a little bit about that from the...
Okay, I mean, it works with where do I start? At Dbox, we do pretty well with getting credit. We have great contracts, which I'm willing to share with anybody in the industry. We hold on to our intellectual property, so we own the copyright on the imagery, which means that allows us to legally tell people they can't use it, right? But the thing that really got me going, I guess about a month ago, is when I really started to look under the hood of what was really going on in Instagram. And I started to see a pattern which I thought was really bad. And that is, I started to see that there was rendering companies posting other rendering companies' work as kind of inspiration, with the idea that that was okay. And it's not. It's not okay. It's not okay because it's very blatant what they're doing. They're using other people's work, other people's property, to garner attention, to garner followers, and then in that grabbing attention for their own brand, which is rendering. It's called passing off. It's like putting somebody else's product in a shop window, and then what you actually have to sell inside is actually not the stuff that's in the window. It's pretty basic stuff. So that was the first thing that got my blood boiling, right? Because it's not cool. Don't do that. If you're a rendering company, don't start an Instagram posting other people's renderings, right? That's just, no. So, well, you can do what you want, but my opinion is it's incredibly unethical. And a lot of people will think it's unethical. The second pattern that I saw is that there's these Archviz aggregators that I could see were purposefully burying the credit or not crediting at all. So what I mean by that is that you'd see the post and it would say hashtag blah, blah, whatever, the name of the aggregator. An aggregator being, aggregation means a collection of things put together into something, right? Aggregating. So an Archviz aggregator, and we all know what they are, but they're burying the credit. Why are they burying the credit? It's very obvious why they're burying the credit. They don't want you to follow the artist. They want to absorb all of the traffic to them. So they bury the credit or they forget to credit. So have to change that. The thing is, on an Archviz aggregator, the subject is the artist. It's not the architecture. And I can tell you why it's not the architecture, because in most cases, they're posting stuff they don't even know what the architecture is. So it's like a bathroom or a kitchen, and they'll say, oh, gorgeous bathroom, whatever, you know, ... bury the credit way down there. The subject is the artist. So that has to be first line, and it has to be a live tag. So that artist can be followed, it can be recognized, right? And if you're an Archviz artist and your work is posted on one of these large aggregators and your credit is buried, it's not good for you. I'm telling you, it's not good for you.
A lot of people think this is...
It's not.
This is amazing, and I have to say, like, ourselves, we've, like, liked stuff when that happens, and we've not paid the most attention when that happens.
I've done it myself. I've seen the Dbox has been posted on this thing, and it's been tagged, so I've got the notification. I've seen it, and I've done my little thank you or whatever. But I looked under the hood, and I can see it's not right.
This isn't right.
And so we're changing that. I mean, you know, the name we're going under is the Credit Revolution.
Yeah.
Right. The credit. It's a revolution.
It is.
We're going to change things.
And it's been revolutionizing.
And we need to help police each other. I spend a lot of time on these things. I see an image by X, I see an image by Y. Other houses that work, the competitors of ours, and I call it out. I say that's an X image, give them credit. And we all need to do that for each other, because it will lift the value of the entire industry. If we have credit, then there's authorship. A painting with no provenance has no value. As much as it looks like a Van Gogh, if you can't prove it's a Van Gogh, it's worth fuck all. Yeah. So it goes back to the very notion of the value of us as artists. Then, God, I'm sounding like I'm preaching now. I sound like one of those evangelical preachers. We are in the credit revolution. I mean, it sounds so stupid, me talking about a credit revolution.
It's not.
Well, it kind of is when our planet is like a dying, but...
True, in that perspective.
But I catch myself and go, slow down, you need a speeding ticket. You should be protesting about something else. But then we get to, and this is the other thing I need to explain so everybody else understands. You've got the Archviz aggregators. Those are the ones that post renderings of architecture. The subject is the artist. Don't confuse that. So credit first line. An architectural aggregator, right? That's a blog, let's say like Architecture Hunter or Deezen or Architecture, these great publications. The subject is the architecture or the architect. So you can't expect to get first line live credit there. Yeah. So don't be stupid. Don't ask for that. But you need to get a live tag credit after the architect, because it is your IP. So it's okay to ask for that. So understanding those two distinctions is very important, because it's the subject. You have to understand where you are in the subject. We are not the building. We are not the architect in this case, but we are the visualizer. And it's in the hierarchy we deserve a credit. The credit you should look for in publications. And I'm trying to spit this all out because I want people to really think about this. It's so important to everybody working in the industry. And I'll say it again, it's at Dbox, we've kind of got this sorted out. We get credit. I'm not doing this for me. I want to make sure that
Definitely.
when I stop doing this, because there's other art that I want to do later in my life, there's going to be a point where I'm going to have to turn off Archviz and I want to go back to painting or want to go back to more music or whatever. I want to make sure that all of this is left in a place where I can say, I was part of an industry that I'm proud of. Right? So that's what it's all about. And so if you need to watch this video and the things that I've just said about the credit and the credit you deserve and the credit you expect, if you have to watch this, 3 or 4 times to understand it, please do, because it's very, very important to every single artist. You deserve the credit.
And I think you said it in the best words possible. And I mean, just to put it in a small example, even if you're the artist that's starting out and thinks that, whatever mention you get is great, even if it's in the 5th line, no, because imagine when you're an artist with 10 years, how long it took you to get there, because you weren't credited in the beginning and you're doing amazing work. I mean, you should be credited from the get-go and your work should be recognized from the get-go. And I think I just want to say and mention, taking on what you said, that what you've built is incredible, because you've kind of gathered this community along with other people such as Jeff that we know and love. And I always have to give a shout out to my Jeffy, our Jeffy. But bringing that together and bring those people together and kind of creating this group of architectural visualization companies and artists coming together and really believing in this is something unique and hasn't been done in the industry. And I think from all of us, it's a big thank you and a big congratulations at the same time.
We haven't started. It's going to be a long. We're going to lose it. We're going to lose a few battles. We're going to win this war. We have to. It's very, very important, because if we don't get the crediting situation under control now, it's fast forward 5 years.
It's all
good luck to all of you. Good luck to all of you, because the value of everything you do is just going down.
Yeah.
Without credit, there is no value, because as soon as an artist's work has a credit underneath it, it suddenly is more important, because it means that the artist is valuable. If it's anonymous, it's just anonymous. It's so basic, and it's a right that everybody should fight for.
Definitely.
So keep an eye out. I'm going to share the Dbox contract again about IP. I did one on Jeff's CG Architect a while back. I need to find a good way to do that again. We could do it on you, or could do it on Jeff's.
I will link whatever you need below, and just tell me what you need.
And apologies to everybody if I sound like a maniac about this. It's important to me. It really is.
I don't think you're a maniac.
I'm sick of people feeling. I'm sick of people feeling happy that their stuff shows up somewhere else, and knowing it's not doing them any good whatsoever.
On that cliffhanger, because everyone's giving me times.
It's Halloween. We've all got to go out and ghost somebody.
We're not dressed yet, right?
Oh, crikey!
But I just want to thank you. Because this has been incredible.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
And I have to say this, I think everyone around, so we've got other people around here, everyone's telling you, wow. And the depth of hearing Matthew and his experience has been incredible and humbling. So thank you so much. And
thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for listening to me ramble. And shoot my mouth off.
It's a true pleasure. And I'm going to leave on a cliffhanger, because we have more to talk about, but I have to put in a second part, because we haven't even touched a third of the questions and kind of things I want to talk about. One of the big things is the Emmys, and I want to congratulate you on that. And we're going to link that.
Congratulate you and Archie9 on the CG Architect Award with that beautiful visual you did.
It's our Emmy. It's as important. So that's why I want to really talk to you, because of how important that was. I'm going to link everything. And Matthew, thank you so much for being awesome sport.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for helping organize this shoot.
Timon, Carlos, Gabriel, Ellie, thank you. You guys are awesome. All right, let's cut it here.
Cheers.
All right. Dude.